Okay, we're live. It takes me a while to get these technical things figured out sometimes, but we finally got it done. I'm Chuck Holton. Thank you for coming on with this update. Back at the time, was it the 18th? 18th of October, and here in Israel, this is like the 12th day of the war now. We have been very busy traveling all over this country since the war started. CBN has a team of people on the ground. We had more show up today. CBN is doing full court press on this because this is really, really important. Just from a global geopolitics perspective, from a Christian perspective, from a prophetic perspective. And so we want to do our absolute best to give you a real, true look at what's going on the ground. And this is a pretty sizable country, so we've got to have a lot of people here to cover it. Down in the south, we have been all the way to the border with Gaza in Sderot. We've been to the kibbutzim that were attacked on Saturday. I got a chance to go down there and take a look at some of those, and it was absolutely just horrific. But you've heard plenty about that, so I just want to give you a quick update on what's going on in Israel today. We had President Joe Biden's visit. That was a big deal, and it was a really big deal for anybody that lived in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, because basically the whole place was shut down. It was the traffic was just snarled. You wouldn't believe the logistics required to get President Biden in here safely and get him out again. They had to shut down roads everywhere, so the traffic was just absolute standstill. I was coming back from the northern border of Israel today, and it took us, normally yesterday we went up there in the morning, it probably took 2.5 hours. Probably took us 5 hours to get back today, and a lot of that was just sitting still, absolutely stopped on the road, because they were stopping roads as the president's entourage had to go back to Tel Aviv. Okay, so what went on while we were up north? Well, if it wasn't for the fact that there is so much activity between Gaza and Israel down in the south, what's happening in the north would already be big news and would probably be considered a war anyway. There were just in the last few hours about a dozen attacks across the border from Lebanon into Israel by Hezbollah. We're talking about 9 separate rocket attacks. 4 of those were stopped by the Iron Dome anti-missile system that is employed by the IDF all over this country. The others, you have to understand how the Iron Dome works. It doesn't actually try to shoot down every missile that is fired at them. It's very, very accurate at predicting where those missiles are going to land. So when it detects a missile launch, it can, in just a matter of seconds, calculate where that missile is going to land based on its angle, its speed, its trajectory, everything. It takes all that into account and then figures out where it is likely to land and decides whether or not it is likely to hurt somebody. So believe it or not, for such a small country, there's a lot of open ground across this country, a lot of farmland and woods and mountains and things like that. So if it determines that it's not likely to land in a populated area, it just lets it go. But if it looks like it might land someplace where there are a lot of people, then the Iron Dome shoots it down. So in this case, they shot down 4 of the 9 rockets that were fired into Kiryat Sharim, or Metula, actually up in the very, very far north. If you look at the map of Israel, that point that is the farthest point north you can go is a town called Metula. And so between there and Kiryat Sharim, it was determined that 4 of those rockets might hit a populated area, and they shot those down. The others landed harmlessly on a mountainside or someplace like that. From what I understand, there were no casualties reported. In addition to the 9 rocket attacks that happened, that came in since about 6 p.m. tonight, it's just after 9 p.m. now. Actually, it's 10 o'clock now. So in the last 4 hours, there was a machine gun attack, I'm told, from Hezbollah, and that was neutralized. There were 2 attempted mortar attacks because you understand the border is very close. So anything within about 10 miles of the border is fair, it's in the range of mortars, artillery, things like that. Again, I want to explain this for people who don't have a military background as best I can. Like we saw this a lot in Ukraine. I spent 6 months in Ukraine last year. When you talk about being shelled, shelling is artillery. So that would be like mortars and howitzers and cannons and things like that. Those projectiles typically are fired, within about a 10-mile range. And so if you're not within 10 miles of the border up there in the north, you're probably okay. The government of Israel has approved or cleared a program to evacuate everyone within a 5-kilometer radius, so that's not quite 3 miles, of the border with Lebanon right now. And that means that there are programs in place to help them go someplace else and to house them and things like that. About 25,000 as of last count people have evacuated from the border. A lot of people have not. We were in a kibbutz. We spent the night in a kibbutz last night that was in that range, and the people that we stayed with said, we're not planning on leaving. We're planning on arming up. There were a lot of soldiers that had been added to the force. There was a roving guard. We actually got detained, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. We got detained last night as we were on our way to the kibbutz where we spent the night. But suffice it to say that there are still a lot of people in those kibbutzim around the border area across the region in the north. So there were 2 mortar positions inside Lebanon just a few hours ago that were trying to set up so that they could fire mortars down into Kiryat Shimona. I'm saying Shimona is Sharona. Shimona? I'm blanking out on the correct name on that. Sorry. It's been a long day, folks. Kiryat Shimona. They were going to fire mortars at it, and an IDF tank identified those positions and took them out and neutralized the terrorists that were about to shell or mortar that civilian area inside Israel. We talked to several people inside that border region over the last 24 hours about what they felt about President Biden's visit to come to Israel. Because why would he choose to come now? Was he hoping that it would be a deterrent, that it would keep the Hezbollah or Iran from invading? Did he hope that it would make the IDF postpone their invasion of Gaza longer? Because he's been encouraging them to postpone the invasion and to give people more time to get out. That's a really fine line for the IDF, because the more time they give the IDF, the more time the IDF gives Hamas in Gaza, the more time Hamas has to dig in, to set booby traps, to set IEDs, and that sort of thing. So there's a fine line there. Is that one of the reasons that Biden came? I think he gave us the answer when he went to speak today. When he came here, as he was leaving, he gave a speech. And in the speech, he said one thing that really stood out to me, and that is, he said, "I'm the first American president ever to visit Israel in wartime." And so I was with some Israelis who kind of rolled their eyes and said, "Oh, so that's why he came, so that he could make it a campaign stop and could make this claim but whatever it was, he says he's standing with with Israel. I have to say every Israeli is grateful for the fact that the United States is standing with Israel now. They're grateful for the fact that the United States is sending carriers to the Mediterranean Sea here to, again, be ready in case they need some support. They're grateful for everything the United States is doing. And indeed, a lot of the people that are coming in at the airport are Americans, after all. When I was getting lunch today, an IDF soldier, there were hundreds of IDF soldiers at that little strip mall getting food. I'll talk about that in a second as well. And one of them came up to me and he said, "Are you guys Americans?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I'm from Chicago." And he's an American Jew from Chicago. He's a college student, and he answered the call to come to Israel and defend his country. He's wearing the uniform, he's carrying a weapon, and it's really within just a few days after arriving in Israel, he's in uniform and he's up on the northern border ready to defend his country. The response has been so overwhelming to Israel's call for reservists that I was told today that they put a call out, and they had 160% people answer the call. Meaning, if they called for 100,000 troops, they had 160,000 respond. And the IDF was not even prepared for that many people. They're taking their force from like 160,000 to almost 500,000 people in the space of a week. And so they don't have enough food, they don't have enough places to sleep, they've had to take over entire hotels, and they've literally had to put the call out to restaurants and to citizens to bake things and make food and bring them to the troops here to feed everybody. But let me tell you, everybody in this country is all in on defending Israel because they know that this is their homeland and they got nowhere else to go. So they have been gladly sharing food, drinks, everything they can with the troops. And it's kind of nice to see such a unified front being put forward by the Israelis. I wish America could be more that way in a lot of cases. So while we were up on the northern border yesterday and today, there was a tremendous amount of military hardware coming in. We saw a lot of tanks. We saw armored personnel carriers by the probably hundreds. I mean, a lot. I'll just say a lot. I mean, I shouldn't probably give numbers, but let's just say it's a lot. And heavy equipment transports, medical, they're setting up an entire, like a MASH unit, a surgical hospital up there, ready for a mass casualty event if it happens. They are massively preparing for, this is the time of year when there would normally be a tremendous number of tour buses going all over the place. We drove around Lake Tiberias or the Sea of Galilee today. Normally there'd be tour buses full of tourists all over the place, and there was up until a week ago. But now those tour buses are ferrying troops all over the place, and there are a lot of IDF soldiers on the northern border, as there are on the southern border as well. We also drove along the border through the Golan Heights, the border with Syria today. Again, just hundreds and thousands of troops, hundreds of armored vehicles. They are ready for a fight up there on the northern border. While we were there, I was doing a live broadcast on CBN, and there was they're really on edge because of all this incursion thing is a new thing. They're kind of used to, unfortunately, the rockets coming in and the occasional mortar round or things like that. But a mass incursion of 1,500 people has not happened before. And so it's got everybody pretty spooked. And when I'm doing a live broadcast, I've got to get somewhere quiet where I can set up and kind of have my setup out there and not have a lot of background noise. And I've got to have a good view. And it's kind of hard to find those locations. So we looked around and we found a building, a housing development of a bunch of buildings, kind of like you see behind me right over there. That's actually the King David Hotel, behind me here in Jerusalem. But we're talking buildings that look like that. There were probably 8 or 10 of those that were under construction there in Kiryat Shimona. Shimona. I keep saying that wrong. So the workers had knocked off for the night. There was nobody there. It was nice and quiet. So we thought, hey, perfect place. There was a good view of Mount Hermon behind us. So we went out and got set up, and I was like literally 2 minutes out from going live on the 700 Club, and a couple of police cars came flying down there with their lights on and jumped out and, who are you guys and what are you doing here? And fortunately, when we got here, we applied for a press card. We have to get credentialed as journalists here, and I'll see if I can find mine and show it to you. This press card means that we've been vetted, and it gives us the right to report on the war here. You see that press card? That's what it looks like. There's mine. And we all got one of these. And so, we had to fill out a background check and all this stuff. We all got vetted. We are living in biblical times. So we pulled out our press cards. We showed them to the police. They said, okay, no problem. Just don't film any troops or anything because we don't want to give away their locations if you're going live. It's one thing if you're filming them to show later, but don't show them live. And we're like, yeah, we get that. I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know a little bit about operational security and maintaining that. We don't ever want to tell bad people things they don't need to know, right? So we're all set up. Cops came out, checked us out, things were good. Okay, we went through a couple other checkpoints where people were like, what are you guys doing here? Who are you? We had to show them our press passes. Once we did that, we were good. After a friend of mine that works for another network, Oscar Ramirez, was doing his live broadcast, and in the middle of the broadcast, we heard a boom, boom go off in the distance. And we had heard a couple of missile launches before, but they were coming from Israel going into Lebanon. And we watched the missiles go right over our heads. But while he was doing his live stand-up, a rocket was launched from Lebanon toward us. And as soon as you heard the boom, the sirens went off. And when the sirens go off that close to the border, at that point, we were literally less than 2 miles from the border, actually probably closer to 1 mile from the border. And so you've got a matter of seconds to get to shelter or get on the ground if a rocket gets fired from there. So when I heard that siren go off, I just yelled at Oscar, get on the ground, duck, get on the ground now. And he was kind of, when you're in the middle of a live broadcast, you don't really want to just, go flying off screen. So, but he did. Fortunately, we had our body armor on. We both hit the deck in a ditch next to the street there. And literally within seconds, there was a massive explosion. And I say massive just to say it was close. One of my pet peeves is when journalists say, we're hearing very loud explosions, because that's not really telling your viewers much. If you've ever heard an explosion, all explosions are loud. Saying that you heard a loud explosion is, kind of like you said, I saw a fast race car or something. I mean, it's kind of redundant. But that explosion was probably within a kilometer of where we were. Actually, we never did quite figure out where it landed, although we saw someone had taken a picture of it later on that night. But suffice it to say, it was close enough that we were glad we had been in the ditch. And as I thought about it when we got back up and started packing our gear, we were actually between the two warring parties. Israel was on this side shooting at Hezbollah. Hezbollah was on this side and shooting at Israel, and both of them were going over our heads. That's not a good feeling. That's not a good place to be. So we decided that discretion was the better part of valor, and we thought we'd get out of there and head out to where we were going to stay that night. So we drove up toward the kibbutz. And as I was headed up there, I got a call to ask if I could do a quick live broadcast. And so I was like, we were just by the side of the road, kind of halfway up the mountain. And I said, well, okay, I will, I'll pull over here. And there's a good view of the city down below. It was about this time of night, so it was dark. And so, we just sat up, and you can see the twinkling lights down there, but trust me, you couldn't see anything that would have compromised operational security. I mean, all you can see is just this city of Kiryat Shimona in the distance, Shimona in the distance, and so it looked fine to me. So we set up by the side of the road, set up the tripod. I didn't even put my camera on the tripod yet, and there were some IDF soldiers that were there smoking cigarettes and just looking over the city. They got in their car and left. And as they left, another car came down the road. There was a very expensive BMW, like maybe $100,000 BMW. And it pulled over in front of us down a little ways. And I saw it, but I didn't really pay attention to it. I figured, well, maybe somebody's curious about what we're doing here. And sure enough, they were, because the guy jumped out of the driver's side and came running over, yelling at us in Hebrew. And of course, I don't speak Hebrew, and so I just, like always, said, hey, a journalist, media, press. I got out my press card and was trying to show him, and he didn't speak a word of English, and he looked, I thought he was Arab, actually, very swarthy, looked Arab. It was dark, but he had a big, bulky kind of shirt on, and he started reaching around behind him like he was going for a gun. And so I was like, hey, man, we're cool. Like, no problem. You want us to leave? We'll leave, And I'm trying to talk to him, and he starts yelling at me in Arabic, which kind of confused me for a minute. The guy had been speaking Hebrew, now he's speaking Arabic. I guess maybe he thought we were Arabic, and he wasn't interested at all in the press card, and he was just yelling at us, and he was getting more and more exercised as the moments wore on. Again, all this happened in probably 60 seconds. And I was being very calm, just like, hey, it's okay. It's all right, no problem. We'll go leave, and he just started screaming at the top of his lungs. I mean, like life or death, like I'm about to kill you, screaming, that kind of thing. And I thought, I got that feeling in my chest that I think this would be a good time to leave right about now. So we went and got in the car, and we took off nice and slow down the road. He jumped in his car, pulled in behind us, and was literally a foot from my bumper all the way down the hill, and wasn't, he was just there. And I was not going to race off or anything, not going to go fast, but I just kept going slowly and went all the way down to the bottom of the hill. We got to the bottom of the hill, and the road kind of teed off, and to the left there was a checkpoint with some IDF soldiers. At that point, the guy behind me started just laying on his horn, not beeping his horn. I mean laying on his horn and pointing out the window over at the soldiers. So I said, all right, we'll go over there. So I pulled over, put my blinker on and went over. And as soon as I got kind of close to soldiers, he zoomed around me and cut me off. And his window was down, my window was down, and he started pointing his gun at me out the window. It was dark. I couldn't quite tell if he was pointing his gun or his finger at first, but I'm pretty sure it was his 9mm, and was, again, just screaming at the top of his lungs. So right at that point, about 9 IDF soldiers came running out of that checkpoint with their assault rifles and drawn down, and obviously they thought something really was wrong, something very bad was happening, and I thought, okay, this is a really good way to get hurt. So I got out of the car very slowly with my hands raised, and I said, guys, anybody speak English? Thank God, one of the soldiers, several of them, but one of them was an American guy and spoke perfect English. So he came forward and he said, what is going on? And I said, this guy is really upset. He was not in uniform. I didn't know if he's police or what. He's not in a marked car. It's just a BMW. But he's pointing his gun at me and he's yelling at me in Arabic, and I don't know what's happening. But and then he got out of the car and was all but lighting his hair on fire. Like, I've rarely seen anybody as excited or angry as this guy was. And I think what he thought was that he had captured a couple of infiltrator terrorists who were up on the mountain taking pictures. I don't know. But he was very upset. So the IDF guys kind of were like, hey, calm down, man, calm down. That guy came over to me. I thought he was going to slap me. Like he was coming at me, and they got between us and were kind of holding him off. And I was just like, dude, like, just take it down a notch, man. What's going on? So they finally got him calmed, just not really calmed down, but just got away from me. I gave them my press cards. They said, all right, we'll check them out. They started talking to us, and I said, was supposed to be doing a live broadcast like 1 minute ago, and I missed that. But I mean, we're just here doing our job. We're on your side, man. And he said, all right, no problem. So they talked to that guy. They finally kind of talked him off the ledge a little bit. And he went and got in his car and literally like burned rubber and just flew off down the road, still very angry. And all of them were kind of like, what is up with that guy? Wow. Like, I don't know what he's so upset about, but they were very apologetic. The IDF soldiers, these are young guys, just like I was, 18, 19 years old, in their mid-20s maybe. But they were all like, hey, we're really sorry about that. We understand you're here to do a job, and it's a difficult job, and it's a dangerous job. So, but you have to understand, things are really tense right now, and so we're sorry. And I said, no problem, I get it. This is not the first time I've been in that situation. But they said, well, we're gonna have to detain you here until the police get here, because that guy called the cops and told them you were terrorists, and so they're gonna want to come check you out. So we said, fine, whatever. So we stayed there and talked to them. And, it was very interesting to get some time to just talk to these guys one-on-one. And they were just like, we are just so sickened by what happened. And we really would rather not be fighting. Obviously, we don't want to fight. Nobody, Israel did not want this war. But all of us are committed to being here, and they started it, but we're going to finish it. And we told them we'd pray for them. They were very grateful for that. They said, man, our country needs all the prayer it can get right now. And so it was fine. After a few minutes, then they said, okay, we just got a call from our headquarters, and they said, you guys are free to go, you're good. So we went up to, it was actually Dalton Thomas, if you follow FAI, I think that's Freedom Alliance International or something. I forget what FAI stands for. But we got to stay at his house. He has a house up there just north of the Golan Heights. And he was kind enough to let us stay there last night, because there were no hotels open and very few restaurants or anything. So we got a good night's sleep. About 3 o'clock in the morning, we're awakened by a big explosion. That was the Hezbollah guys firing a rocket anti-tank missile into Israel. Israel responded with a couple of rockets going back. And today has been more of the same. So suffice it to say that that's what we saw up on the northern border. We talked to a former intelligence officer from the IDF. She was a lieutenant colonel and spent, I think, 17 years in the IDF. And she told us that she feels like the concept of deterrence is pretty much, worthless at this point. That's been their strategy here in Israel for a long time. They've been trying to deter Hamas and Hezbollah and everybody else that wants to kill them. Imagine living in a place where everywhere you look, north, south, and east, there are people who want to kill you. That can't be a comfortable feeling. But they've been trying to deter them, and there's deterrence just hasn't worked. So we've got to do something to stop this once and for all. Now, I want to talk about information more for just a minute, because I told you I would. And the information battle space, let's call it. There's a kinetic battle space where the bullets are flying. That's here on the ground. There's an information battle space that exists virtually in social media and YouTube and that sort of thing. And I saw in Ukraine that the the party who makes best use of the information battle space is likely to shape not only the narrative or shape people's opinions about what's happening, but they can actually shape events on the ground, because opinions change what politicians do, and what the politicians do affects what the soldiers do, and so it actually affects things on the ground. So in Ukraine, Russia has very, very effectively made use of the information battle space to shape the narrative, or at least the opinions, of a good portion of American voters. American conservatives especially have been very heavily influenced by by Russian propaganda about the war in Ukraine. So if you've heard that there were bioweapons labs built in Ukraine to make weapons to use against Russia, that's absolute Russian propaganda. I've checked it out myself. I've been to the locations that Russia said were bioweapons labs, and they're like veterinary clinics, and they're in built up areas like this where you would never ever put a weapons lab. I have been to bioweapons labs in the United States at Fort Meade and out in Dugway Proving Grounds, Utah, and would never be put in a residential area, and yet Russia has done a good job at shaping the narrative and the opinions of a lot of people in the United States, and that has worked very much in their favor. It's about the only thing they've done well in the war in Ukraine, actually. That is the new kind of war. What happens in the information battle space, it changes the events on the ground in the kinetic battle space. And so this is what we're seeing now. I want you to think about that as you watch the news. I want you to think about that as you see what's coming out. So we saw this yesterday, this terrible bombing of a hospital in Gaza. Within minutes of that bomb exploding near, not on the hospital, but near the hospital in Gaza, the narrative out of Hamas was that the IDF had bombed a children's hospital and had killed 500 children. Since then, there has been basically irrefutable evidence that has come out that has been shown not just from the IDF or the Israeli government, who obviously have a vested interest in showing that they were not the ones that sent that bomb, but from places like Al Jazeera and from other Muslim countries around the world who have said, yeah, it looks like it was actually a faulty rocket that was fired by the PIJ, Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, inside Gaza, right? So if you've been following the news, you've been hearing this debate, and literally just within hours, all across the Muslim world and in the United States and in Western Europe and everywhere, we've seen protests and very, very angry groups of people who have attacked the embassy in Istanbul and in Beirut and in Iraq and in Western Europe. And just there have been attacks all over the place, even just 10 miles from where I'm standing in Ramallah. There have been big, hundreds and hundreds of people protesting, very, very angry about this, and based on a rumor, based on actually a rumor that has been disproven since the word first came out. But that information war waged by Hamas, well, waged on both sides, but in that case, that information war, that rumor put out by Hamas, influenced people to the point that there are massive violent protests all over the world that are claiming that Israel bombed a children's hospital and killed 500 people. Now, let me just explain to you something about what I saw when I was in Afghanistan. I've been doing this job as a war correspondent for more than 2 decades. I spent probably a couple years of my life in Afghanistan. We'd go there for a couple months every year. And I'm just listening because I'm hearing a siren, but it's far away, so I probably don't need to run for it. In Afghanistan, one of the things that would happen is whenever the United States accidentally bombed something that ended up with killing a civilian, somebody we didn't mean to kill, collateral damage, if you will. What we would do is the United States Army would pay the family of that victim, would pay them off, would give them a payout. And that turned out to be a pretty bad idea, because after that, any place we bombed in Afghanistan, if they dropped a bomb in the middle of the desert, miles away from any human habitation, the next morning there would be a bunch of little piles of dirt all around that place with flags placed in them to look like graves. And there were, at the nearest military base, there'd be a line of Afghan people lined up with their hands out saying, "I need my payment, you killed my child." You know, and every time we dropped a bomb in Afghanistan, they would claim we killed 75 children. That is information war. And in that case, it was for economic purposes in many cases. But in this case, it is because Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and all of the bad actors in the world understand that they can shape, their only chance of winning against Israel. Hamas knows it cannot win militarily against Israel. The only way they can win against Israel is if they're able to whip up the Muslim world and make the rest of the world angry at Israel and make Israel lose support of the West. And if they lose the support of America, if they lose the support of Western Europe, if they lose the support of the West, and they're able to inflame the Muslim world against Israel, that's how Israel loses. So the information war, therefore, would have a direct effect on events on the ground. So I want you to think about that whenever you hear a story come out in the following days, because in the coming days, you're going to hear a lot more stuff like that. There is information war, there's propaganda on both sides, obviously. It is the job of the military and the intelligence services here in Israel, in the United States, in Europe, everywhere, to put out a narrative that is favorable to the outcomes that they're looking for, obviously. But those narratives don't always have to be a lie. Many of them carry a kernel of truth. There was a bomb that landed on a hospital or near a hospital in Gaza yesterday. That's the truth. We know that. Everybody agrees on that part. Whether or not it was fired by Israel or Hamas or PIJ or Hamas or whoever, that's where the propaganda comes in. Now, again, there needs to be an investigation. There needs to be proof, and that's what Israel has done. Israel did not immediately come out and say, "Hey, it wasn't us." They didn't do that immediately. It took them some time because they actually did an investigation to find out if it was them or not. And they determined that it was not. And they showed the proof. They were transparent about that. And so I think you can believe that. I'm just going to close with this. One of the IDF troops that I was talking to last night asked me an interesting question. He said, "How do you determine it? You've been doing this for 20 years, you say." He said, "Chuck, how do you decide what side to report on in a conflict? When you look at a conflict in the world, how do you decide which side to report on?" And I said, "Well, I don't report, I don't decide in my head that, well, I'm going to go support one side or the other. I decide I'm going to go and I'm going to find out the truth of what's going on as best I can, and I'm going to report that. I will take a position when it's a moral position. If you see a child being murdered, I don't have any problem as a journalist saying that is abominable, that's horrible, and that should not happen. But I'm not just automatically going to side with one government or the other from a political standpoint. I want my decisions to be made on a moral basis, not a political basis. And so that's what I told this IDF soldier. And I said, but he said, how do you decide, like, for example, in Ukraine, whether or not you're going to go to Ukraine and report or go to Russia and report? And I said, well, that's easy. I just have to ask myself, which side would allow me to report something negative about them? For example, when I was in Ukraine, let's see, back last year, there was an incident last year where some Ukrainian soldiers were very angry at some captured Russian soldiers. I imagine, having been a soldier myself, that they captured these Russian soldiers after a battle, and some of the Ukrainian soldiers' friends had been killed in that battle, and they just captured the guys who killed their friends. So of course, they're angry, they're upset. But one of the Ukrainian soldiers took his pistol out and went down the line of Russian soldiers and shot them in the leg, shot each one of them in the leg. And somebody was filming that. And that film got out. And I saw that and I said, that's absolutely objectionable. That's absolutely morally wrong. And Ukraine should prosecute that guy and put him in jail for doing that. That's a war crime. That's wrong. And I was in Ukraine when I was giving that report. And you know what? The Ukrainians didn't arrest me. They didn't kick me out of the country. They allowed me to make that report. If I had tried to make a report like that in Russia, if I had been in Russia and had seen Russians torturing Ukrainian soldiers, which has definitely happened, and had spoken out against it, I would disappear. I wouldn't be kicked out of the country. I would have been murdered. I would disappear, or I would have, at very least as an American, been put in jail and used as a political pawn to try to secure the release of some of their guys or something like that. So the bottom line is, the way that I make a decision about which side to report on or from is I decide, well, where could I safely report something negative about that country if I saw something that was morally wrong happen? And so for me, it's easy. I just came here a week ago from Ukraine. I'm sorry, not from Ukraine, from Armenia. And there's a big conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And the reason I didn't go to Azerbaijan to do that reporting is that Azerbaijan is a dictatorship. And if I had tried to report from Azerbaijan about what was happening, there's a good chance that I would disappear. Armenia, however, gave me a press pass and allowed me to go wherever I want and report on what I saw. The same thing here. I didn't go to the Palestinian territories to report because I would be killed if I went there. And so here in Israel, they have been very grateful for our support. And that's how I want to end, is just by saying that America needs to be standing on the side of what's right. Not if we make our decisions about who to support based on what's right, not what's politically expedient, then I think we'll always do the right thing. In the long run, that'll always be better for our country, for our national interests, and for our national sovereignty. So I would encourage you to pray for Israel, pray for the Palestinians in Gaza, pray for the people in Lebanon. Pray that I've seen this in other conflicts, like in Syria and Afghanistan. When ISIS went into Syria and went into Iraq and started cutting people's heads off and that sort of thing, there were a lot of Muslims who saw that behavior and were so just disgusted by it that they left Islam. They saw what ISIS was doing. They saw how they were torturing people, and they saw what they were just killing innocents. And they were so horrified by it that they left their religion. They said, if that's what Islam looks like, I want nothing to do with Islam. And I talked to people, I've talked to people many times who have said, I then sort of had a time of, not sure what I believe, and eventually they came to Christ. Eventually they came to become Christians. I heard an interview on a live hit I did earlier today. There was a person on right before me who was in Lebanon. She's a Lebanese woman. She was reporting on the situation there at the embassy. And that was one of the things she said, is that many people here in Lebanon are so disgusted by what they saw on October 7th happen in Israel, that even though they sort of feel like they have to support Islam, they have to support their Muslim brothers, they are horrified by what they've seen, and they want nothing to do with that kind of behavior. So I think that one of the things that we can pray for as Christians is that more Muslims will see what is happening and will be driven away from that false religion and driven into the arms of Jesus. Because look, you can bring peace through violence. You can bring peace through the sword. If you stand over somebody with a sword and you say, you do anything to that person, I'm going to kill you, they won't do anything to that person. And you can bring peace, but that they can still hate their enemy. So you can have peace, but still have hatred, as long as that sword is there to keep the peace. But the only thing that will bring lasting peace is love. And with love, love conquers hate. So you can't have hate and love together. And so if you bring love, if you bring forgiveness, then that forgiveness will bring lasting peace. And only that will change the hearts of men. And so I had this discussion with an Israeli day before yesterday. He said, are you saying that we should forgive the people who did this to us? And I said, you personally, yes, you should forgive it. I'm not saying the government of Israel it's their job to forgive. The government is an institution. An institution cannot forgive. Their job is to protect you, to do whatever is necessary to safeguard their population and make sure this never happens again. But the individual Jews here in Israel, they need to forgive their enemies, because if they don't, it will eat them up inside like a cancer, and it will destroy them from within. Because hating your enemy only hurts you. You can kill your enemy without actually hating him, believe it or not. Sometimes killing the enemy is the most loving thing you can possibly do. I say that, it might sound weird, but think about this scenario. If I'm guarding a marketplace here, and I'm a soldier, and I see a guy with a suicide vest running into that marketplace, and he's going to blow himself up in a matter of seconds and kill untold number of innocent people in the marketplace. What's the most loving thing I can do for the people in that marketplace? I can put a bullet into that suicide bomber. I can kill him. That's the most loving thing I can do for them. But think about this. What's the most loving thing I can do for that suicide bomber? Because there's no time to reason with him. I'm not going to convert him. He's got seconds to live, one way or another. The most loving thing I can do for him at that point is to shoot him, is to kill him, and to stop him from committing that heinous crime for which he's going to have to stand before God very, very soon and give an account for himself. If I knew right now in my right mind that someday down the road I was going to have a chemical imbalance, I was going to lose my head, and I was going to run into a daycare center and take the children hostage or something, if I knew that right now, somebody said, I can see the future and that's going to happen, I would say, if you see me running for a daycare center and it looks like I'm going to take it over, please kill me. That'd be the most loving thing you could do for me. Put me out of that situation so that I don't have to answer to God for doing that. So I'll finish with this. C.S. Lewis once said that all killing is not murder, just like all sex is not adultery. And Israel has got, as a nation, the government, the military, has got to do what's necessary to safeguard their population. That is the reason you have a government in the first place. That's their job. That's America's job. We could talk more about whether America's doing a good job, that our government's doing a good job at safeguarding us as citizens, but that's for another time. The bottom line is that we as people need to forgive our enemies. We need to stop hating. And that's the only thing that's going to bring lasting peace here or anywhere else. Please continue to follow our reporting. You can tell I'm losing my voice. I've been doing nonstop live hits and reports, but I want to keep this stuff coming to you. We appreciate each and every one of you. CBN is a donor-funded news agency, and so if you like the kind of reporting you're getting, if you like hearing from the ground, this is not cheap. It's expensive to bring you this kind of reporting. It takes sometimes tens of thousands of dollars a day to have a team here on the ground and do this kind of reporting. And so if you feel so led, please go to cbn.com and donate. We do our best to put those donations to the best use possible. We don't go stay in the King David Hotel right there, which is $700 a night. We've got 5 people living in an Airbnb right here for $150 a night. That's how we do our best. Whenever we can. When I was in Armenia, I slept in my car. I'm the king of $9 a night hotels, So we do our best to make those dollars stretch every way we can. But CBN definitely needs those donations to continue to bring you this kind of reporting. So don't forget about us when you go to give. They're tax deductible. You can go to cbn.com. You can also follow me if you want to follow just kind of behind the scenes for what I do. I show a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that I do on my YouTube channel, which is The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton. You can go to just do a search for The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton, and you can see my reporting there. You can also go to chuckholton.locals.com. That's a place where I just sort of aggregate all of the writing, the reporting, my books, my documentaries. Everything goes to chuckholton.locals.com. You can go there and find all of the stuff about me and what I do if you'd like to do that as well. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening. Please go ahead, continue to support CBN, and keep watching. We'll see you later. Take care.